How can you maximize the likelihood that your academic article will be published in a peer-reviewed journal before you even submit it? Stick around and learn 6 key tips today on navigating academia. What's up, everybody? My name is Dr. J. Phoenix Singh. Welcome to Navigating Academia, your leading source for guidance on how to advance your career in academia. As always, I appreciate the love, so please do like and share this video with your colleagues and students, subscribe to our channel, hit that bell, and comment below. You can follow me at these social media accounts. Getting published in a peer-reviewed journal is difficult, to say the least, and writing for them is much different than anything that you'll have ever written the rest of your life, let alone the essays that you wrote as an undergraduate, newsletter articles, magazine articles, columns, blogs, sponsored posts, anything. Writing for a peer-reviewed journal is a beast unto itself. And so today we're going to be discussing 6 key tips for how, before you even submit to one of these journals, you can maximize the likelihood that your piece is going to get published. Now, publication rates are going to vary widely between journals and between fields and disciplines. And so because of that, it's not something where I can guarantee in any way, shape, or form that taking these steps is going to make sure that 100% your pieces are going to get published. But what I can guarantee is that if you do follow some or all of these tips, you're going to get a much better sense as to whether or not your piece is a good fit for a given journal. And you can also be really assured that if you follow these instructions, when you do submit, whoever you submit to, in terms of whichever journal, is going to be really appreciative of the work that you put in. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Before we start, I want to let you guys know this is a very involved topic, so even though usually I'm not looking at notes and all, I do have some reference here in front of me. So because of that, if you see me kind of lowering my head and these sorts of things, that's what I'm looking at, okay? So let's go ahead and jump right in. Tip number 1 is to contact the editor. Now, every journal has an editor. They're kind of like the president. They're like the CEO of the journal. And they've essentially started working with the publishing house, whatever it is. There are a lot of different publishing houses that are out there. But this publishing house, they will specialize, or at least have a branch, where all it is these academic journals. And most of the time, these are private companies, right? There are certainly some nonprofit presses as well. But these guys, they're making money, right? And the way that they make money is by selling articles. So obviously you want to make sure that only the best stuff ends up in a journal. And so this is one of the functions of peer review for academics, and make sure that our field is built with a lot of integrity, or as much as possible, certainly. And of course the pieces end up being higher quality because we've got peer-reviewed comments coming in. But for the company, for the publishing house, these guys, they're making money. Oftentimes these individual pieces, individual articles sell for in between $20 to $60 for a single purchase of one article, or different people, different institutions, universities, for example, or hospital libraries, whatever it may be, they can subscribe to a set of journals, like a package. And this is how people are making money. Now, you as an academic, you're not going to be making money out selling your article. Unfortunately, right? At least that is not common at all. However, the editors and associate editors usually are making some kind of money, right? Now, this is not across the board, but usually at least the editor is being paid to be able to run this journal. Now, the editor usually takes your piece when you submit it, and they either give it a yay or nay in the first place, whether or not they want to accept the piece for peer review in general, or if they just say, you know what, it's just not for us, the fit's not there, it's not written well enough, it's, it doesn't really conform to our standards that we put on our website, you need to just take it elsewhere, or really, revamp the thing before submitting it to us. And obviously, rapid rejection is the best. If you're gonna get rejected, the last thing you want is to put something in for peer review, 6 months later the thing comes back and they're like, not for us, reject, don't even revise and resubmit it, we just don't want it. That stinks, right? We don't want that. But if you contact the editor with the abstract of the piece before you actually submit it, and this is something that people very rarely do, I've had a great deal of success with this, and I've had colleagues who are the ones who taught me to do this, and at the end of the day, a lot of people think that it's just very respectful. You know, this is how the editors end up taking it. I have never, not one time, had a negative response to this. Now, the worst thing that can happen is one of two things. Number one, they just don't write back, and you can take that sign however you want. Sometimes the editors are very busy people. They're usually leading academics in their field. So, you shouldn't be surprised if, your article got lost in the your email got lost in the shuffle. But if that's the case, sometimes you may want to call. You don't want to seem needy. You don't want to seem like somebody who is, overly aggressive, and that could be seen as overly aggressive. So it's one of these things where, per usual, there's no right way to do it. There's only a lot of wrong ways, but I'm going to try to steer you in the right direction, right? So when you write the email, something very similar like, "Dear Dr. Johnson, sincerely hoping this message finds you well. I've recently finished an article entitled da-da-da-da-da, which I believe may be a good fit for your journal, comma, whatever the journal's name is in italics, period. Several articles which have been recently published in the piece, for example, and then parenthetical documentation of whatever the articles are, appear to or have led me to believe that the goodness of it could be strong in terms of contributing to the outstanding track record of the journal on this specific topic in this specific area." Right? I would be sincerely grateful for your valuable time if you might be able to give me a sense as to whether or not you believe that the piece would also be a fit. The abstract for the piece can be found below, give the abstract, indent that over, go back to the left flush, and say, "Grateful for your time, comma, whatever your name is." Very rarely do you ever want to sign your name as either, like for me, J. Phoenix Singh, comma, Ph.D., comma, Ph.D. The worst thing you can do is something like Dr. Singh. That would be brutal. That would make you look real bad, okay? And if all it is like your first name, but then there's nothing underneath it, that's not great either, right? So if you're gonna sign your first name, like, best wishes, Jay, and then underneath that, have the line and then say, J. Phoenix Singh, comma, Ph.D., Institute of Criminology, University of Cambridge. Boom, done. Now it seems both formal and informal at the same time, so you're covering your butt whichever way it goes, right? But contact the editor and ask. Again, right? Worst thing that happens is they either don't write back or they say no. That saves you a lot of time. Sometimes if you submit, it's going to go to the editor anyway. However, it could take them a while to reject you. This could be something where they appreciate that it's saving them the time. The other thing also is that if after they've already said, yeah, this actually looks like it could be a good fit, and you submit, it's a mere exposure effect, right? Which is a cognitive bias that suggests that the more somebody is exposed to you, the more they like you. So if they've seen the article's name before, they've seen you before, they read the abstract, they recognize it, they're going to be like, oh yeah, I remember I liked that one, and they'll pass it along to the associate editor. And this is nothing but a good thing, right? So at the end of the day, this is a great initial step that you can take. Is it right for every submission? No. Is it right if, let's say, you submit, 5 pieces to the same journal in a year and you're, kind of bombarding the editor with, requests? That's not great either, right? Just remember, it's almost like a poker hand. You've only got so many cards that you can play in a given period of time. Be really picky and choosy how you use your social capital. Tip number 2, and this is across the board, any journal that you're submitting to, make sure that you're complying with the instructions for authors. I used to be the editor of a peer-reviewed journal in forensic psychology. Oh my gosh, guys. So many times, instructions for authors, if you go to the website for the journal, Google the journal, and, whoever the publishing house is, they will have a page specifically dedicated to that journal, and on there will be something about instructions for authors. Otherwise, Google instructions for authors and the name of that journal in quotes. It is going to give you guidance both in terms of the kinds of articles that are published in that journal. So for example, some will publish editorials and some will not. Some will publish letters to the editor, some will not. Some will have a whole section on reviews. Other ones say we only want primary research articles. It'll give you information on word count. It should be at least this many words and no longer than this many words. And when you're determining the word count, include tables and figures and footnotes and appendices and references, or don't include any of those. All of this information is in the instructions for authors, and if you do not comply with the instructions for authors, what it suggests to the editor and the associate editor or editors and all of the editorial board members or outside counsel that come in to be able to peer review is that you do not care. You don't care enough to be able to get the piece published in the journal. Be anal. Yeah, it's going to take some time. Yeah, it's really painful if your piece gets rejected from 3 or 4 journals. It's one of the reasons some people are like, I'll just settle for a low impact journal because I'm sick and tired of going to all the leading journals and submitting my stuff, going through peer review, it doesn't end up getting in, etc. Because each of these journals, even within the same field, can have very different instructions for authors. And I'm not just talking about the big stuff, I'm talking about things like the abstract style. For example, in scientific literature, scientific fields, is it something where it's structured? So it'll say, introduction, 1 to 2 sentences, methodology, 1 or 2 sentences, results, implications, and then how many keywords do they want you to give? 3 keywords, 5 keywords, up to 7 keywords. Trust me on this one. Same field, you can have totally different rules and regulations, right? And not just the abstract style, what kind of reference convention? There are many journals out there where, remember, for me, I was in psychology, so it would be American Psychological Association 6th edition, which sounds great. The big problem, though, is that if you're going to end up using that convention for one journal, another journal may say, well, we have our own convention, and it looks a lot like APA 6th edition, but we're going to change some stuff around. Capitalization, period placement, comma placement, date placement, italicization, quotation marks. Everything you can imagine can be different, and trust me on this one, it can drive you nuts. But sometimes, the feeling that I get, and I'm sure I'm wrong about it, is that the reason why people put some unique things in the instructions for authors is to see if people actually looked or not. Are they paying attention to your journal? Because I can tell you, if I go to a reference section for a journal that I'm peer reviewing for, and I know the reference style, and they did not conform to it, I don't know what else they didn't pay attention to, and that is a real, X for me. It will immediately go from, accept to accept with minor revision, which, as you'll see in another video that I'll make, you never get something accepted without minor revision, but I'm still going to dock you for it. Right? And it's not a good thing, because then I'm going to be a lot more cautious and anal when I'm going through that piece of yours, right? So the next thing is something silly like heading capitalization. In your different, subheadings, sometimes they want everything capitalized. Sometimes they want only the first letter of the first word, or the first letter of every word, or the first letter of every major word, or they want it bolded, or italicized, or indented. This sounds really arbitrary and silly, but it is not. Make sure you're going through and paying attention to this. Same thing when it comes to tables and figures and appendices and footnotes. Oftentimes in the instructions for authors, it's going to tell you how to be able to format those. And if you don't format them properly, again, if I was a peer reviewer, I would dock you for that. And it seems arbitrary. Trust me, I do get that, right? But to people in academia, it's not arbitrary, and remember, you're playing their game, so make sure that you're really paying attention to the instructions for authors. Tip number 3 is to ensure a goodness of fit with the journal in general. What I want you to do is go back through the past 1 year, 3 year, and 5 years of the table of contents for that journal before you submit, and take a look to be able to find how many articles, and whether they're by the same authors or different authors, etc., there are on your topic area, whatever it is. When I was in forensic mental health and corrections, I did stuff on what's called violence risk assessment, which is predicting the likelihood of future violence. It's kind of like criminal profiling, but not really. So what happened there was that I would go through a journal, especially if it wasn't a niche journal in my subfield, it wasn't a criminal justice journal, it was a general medical journal, and I would go through the past years, again, the past 1 year, because then it's obvious that whoever the editor and associate editors are, they're interested in that topic. Back 3 years, again, pretty recent. Back 5 years, I wouldn't go any further than that. You know, editors and associate editors get replaced all the time. Usually they're there for, you know, a hot second, but then after that, they're gone. So, you know, you have to keep in mind that maybe there was a heyday 7 years ago where every article was about violence risk assessment, but that editor's long gone. And so because of that, whoever's new, they don't care. So if I go to them and say, hey, this got a great goodness of fit with your journal, this is why I'm submitting there, they'll be like, well, that's not really the direction we as a journal are headed in. So save your time. Make sure that, you know, you're publishing in a journal where they have a history, a track record of publication in the near past, especially if it's the near past with the same editor. That's a really good sign, because then, you know, as part of that person's tenure, or people, sometimes you have co-editors, their tenure is that they're going to want to make sure they leave behind, you know, a trail of breadcrumbs for that journal to follow into the future. And you can be a part of that legacy on that particular topic, right? And make sure that when you write, either to the editor before you submit, or even when you do submit, oftentimes you have to have a cover letter. And in that cover letter, really utilize this information and essentially use it to establish the fact that, you know, your piece fits into the track record of that journal, and cite the other pieces, right? Say what makes your piece unique to those, but how it still contributes to the same literature. Tip number 4 is to cite articles from that journal. This is a really cheap thing to do in terms of, it seems really silly, but it actually works. So make sure that, you know, if I'm going to publish in a journal called, you know, International Journal of Forensic Psychology, which isn't a journal, but just a made-up one, for the sake of this example, let's say that's where I want to publish, it would be good to be able to cite those other articles that I mentioned in, you know, tip 3 that you found. And if there's nothing, if there's no track record, still find stuff to cite. Maybe it's stuff that use the same statistical methodology and you can cite it for that purpose in your methods section. Maybe it's something where, you know, the authors made a really compelling point that you use to be able to drive your development or testing of hypotheses in your piece. Fantastic, include that in there, but don't submit a piece where you never mention that journal. Again, do people do that? All the time. But I can tell you that if I'm an editor, an associate editor, or if I'm somebody who's a peer reviewer, the likelihood is that I'm going to check for that. It's a cheap shot. It really is. But it's something that can make a difference. And at the end of the day, if it's just including a few more citations, and you're not limited in your number of citations, or you are, but you've got enough space for it, just do it. Tip number 5 is to choose the right preferred and opposed reviewers. When you're in the process of submitting your piece to the journal, what'll happen is that it will ask you specifically, are there any peer reviewers who you think would be the best fit? And these are called preferred reviewers, or recommended reviewers, depending on the journal that you're submitting to. They can use different terminology. But it's basically, who would you recommend? It doesn't mean that they're going to follow that. The associate editors may not. They could totally disregard it. But if you put it down, they'll at least consider it or know that you know, those are experts in your particular area. So it's important that you identify people in the field who really commiserate with your views, or who are, you know, very talented or have, you know, experience with your work. I mean, you can sometimes even tell whether somebody's peer-reviewed your work in the past and been really favorable. This often happens when reviewer comments come back and they say, you actually missed 3 seminal publications in the field, which are X, Y, and Z, all of which happen to be from that person's lab, or happen to be from their colleagues, or happen to be, you know, directly with them as a first author of all 3. You can make that assumption, right? That person, you know, is into their own work and wants to get it cited. But it's also something where if they ended up accepting your work, you can put them as a preferred reviewer, right? This is a game of chess, guys, right? And the second is opposed reviewers. These are people who, they don't commiserate with your views. Academia is a blood sport, and so maybe they just don't like you as a person. Maybe they're jealous of you. Maybe you're really outgoing and they're really quiet. Maybe, vice versa. Maybe it's something where, they want to hog all the attention, or maybe it's something where they see you as the attention hog. Whatever it is, you can't please everybody all the time. It's a recipe for disaster. But if you catch wind of people who don't like you or definitely don't agree with your work, and you know that based on your read of the literature, then put them in as opposed reviewers. That's okay, right? Sometimes you'll have to justify why, and that's okay. And you'll have to give a really clear reason, or they'll just kind of disregard it. But that kind of makes sense, right? Now, the first port of call for associate editors is going to be looking at their editorial board. So if there's any people on the editorial board who you would really prefer or oppose, make sure to put them in that list, because that's where they're going to go first. And then also, if there's nobody on there, or you want to go a little bit beyond that, consider other people in the field, right? Especially people who are kind of really hot or are like at a given moment. So maybe they've been publishing a lot recently, gotten a lot of attention in the field for whatever reason, served as a keynote at main conferences, whatever. Or there's somebody who's just, known by the associate editor. Academia is a pretty small circle. You're going to know whether or not somebody's friends with the associate editor or the editor. And if they are, it's, more likely that they're going to, recommend that person or reach out to them if you say they're a preferred reviewer and say, hey, listen, is this something you could do? Do me a favor, I'll do you a favor later and peer review for your journal, etc. Right? It can be a quid pro quo, or doing people favors in that regard. Finally, tip number 6 is obvious but important, which is write an innovative piece. Make a unique contribution to the literature. This is really the key to getting your stuff published, right? You can do all the politicking that you want, but if you've done something really, really special, if you've written something in a very elegant fashion, if you've tested a novel hypothesis, if you have added a significant Lego block to the Lego house of academia in your field, you should be very proud of yourself, and the piece then will deserve publication in the first place. That's the best way you can, maximize your chances of getting published, is making sure what you're submitting is actually good. Again, I know that it sounds silly, but really think, is the piece that, you're submitting, is it what I call a lemming piece, which is somebody just, kind of following other people in the field, doing a basic set of analyses. In my old field of violence risk assessment, we had all these checklists, and the developers of the checklist would test them, other people would test them. But then after that, it became, kind of the same article over and over and over and over again without people contributing anything new. You don't want to be one of those people. You want to be somebody who is known for their creativity, for their integrity in the field and how they manage things, and also for being a thought leader. And you can do this. And truly, if you're watching this video, I really believe you can do this because of how dedicated you are to improving your skills. Alright y'all, thank you so much for watching. I want to hear from you in the comments below. What steps have you taken before submitting a piece that you have found that have increased your odds of getting your piece published? I'd love to hear about your experiences, so please do share them, and our viewer community is going to love you for it, because this is something where we're all a big academic family and we're all in this together. So let's go ahead and pay it forward if we have good advice, and share whatever you've got, guys, because this is something where if we all contribute, we're all going to benefit. Don't forget to like and share this video with your colleagues and students, subscribe, and follow us on social media. If you're interested in one-on-one career mentoring in academia, set a consultation call with me via the website below, and let's see if we can work together to be able to increase your awareness in the field, your own personal branding. Let's find some ways to leverage your current skills to make you some extra money as well. And let's see what we can do to be able to have a lot of fun in the process. Signing off, everybody. Have a great day, and remember to get out there, take chances, and be your best self. Thank you so much for stopping by, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here as always. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more in this series on navigating academia, please click on one of these links over here to be able to view more original content. I hope to see you there.